Welcome back to Inspire and Anders, Inspiring the Different. My name is Luca Beutel, and with me, my guest is Kevin, and this is the second part and the final part of our interview. And we ended with the question, what happened over there? What happened in Iraq, and what did he experience there? So enjoy the second 45 minutes.
I think I got, just generally just described it. I was sent ostensibly to, depending on the story. First it was weapons of mass destruction, then it was Al Qaeda in Iraq, and then it was like, well, we're like bringing freedom to these people, and when I was there, I was totally bought into it. I mean, I wasn't bought into the weapons of mass destruction. I wasn't bought into, like that. But it was like, well, we're fighting the terrorists there instead of back home or whatever. And then we're bringing freedom to the people. And I got back home and I realized that pointing guns at children isn't bringing freedom to anybody, Yeah, I mean that's like a very real thing, is to point a gun at a child, and for that to be acceptable. It was entirely acceptable there, because they were afraid of like them, like having like suicide vests strapped to them or whatever. Like it's certainly worse to so you have the two things. You have pointing guns at children, and then like having pointing guns at children being an appropriate thing to do. And I think the actual pointing guns at children is like worse, but the idea that's like appropriate behavior in anyone's mind.
Yeah.
And how that could be legal and sort of justified is a real issue. Yeah. And that's really what I try and like fight against, is this idea that like you can treat other people differently, and that it's okay as long as you're doing it for, quote, the right reasons. Yeah. That somehow the ends justify the means, and that's just not. It's not the case at all.
We all know that saying.
Yeah, and so, it was the people I met in Iraq were all very. I mean, they're people, Yeah. They want the same things as you and I. They want some level of security. They want. So I guess, yeah, they want some hope for the future. They want food. They want to have like a good time sometimes. They want to be able to work. I worked with some Iraqis when I was there. One of the guys, I'm not going to mention his name, but we kind of, in whatever way we could, we became close. And I asked him one day, stupid me, so we were in Tikrit. We were staying in Saddam's palaces. Tikrit was Saddam's hometown. This guy was Sunni. He had everything to gain from Saddam being in power, everything to lose from Saddam not being in power. Mm-hmm. So I asked him, like, out of like sheer just ignorance, I said, "Are you glad that Saddam is out?" And this gentleman said, "Yes." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then like I thought about it, and a couple of days later, I was like, "Is your life any better because of it?" And he said, "No, I just have like different stuff to worry about now. I still have like no hope for my future." And that was a big moment that I still reflect on. And we changed the situation there, certainly, but clearly not for the better. You could say it's the same level of fucked up, but it's certainly not any better. It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I was a part of that. I'm like, I am personally responsible for arguably the worst human rights violation of the 21st century. Yeah. And that's
tough.
Kind of a lot to live with sometimes.
Yeah, it makes more and more sense why you're doing this at the border, this work at the border now. And when you talk about what you experienced in the Iraq, I mean, you've lived through a lot, man. Through a lot. And you are not that old, are you? I mean,
I'm 41.
You have still a lot of years to go, my friend. 41 years old.
Maybe. Between my back and my knees and the occasional hemorrhoid, I feel like,
Kevin,
I'm like 81.
Yeah. Kevin, with all the things that you experienced, you lived through, you also went through, but also when you did the introduction to this podcast, we heard music, and you were part of this band. Is music a thing that kind of helps you, working through this whole stuff, or music was there for you? Or because many people describe music to be there for them in their darkest hours and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a professional musician, and not really. Yeah, I love music. It brings me a lot of joy, but I got back in 2006 from the Army, went to school and just kind of was failed as a civilian. And then I found out I read this book called Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey. It was a suggestion by a friend. If you want me to, I can totally get into it, and I have this whole spiel, but I finished reading that book, and a day later I packed 70 pounds of shit I didn't need into a rucksack and started walking out in the Sonoran Desert, fucked everything up, spent a miserable night out there. Just everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. And then the next morning I got back to the car and I just fell in love with that whole thing. And then that led me to guiding in out of Moab, Utah, at Canyonlands National Park. And that's really what kind of brought me some peace, I guess. There's over the millennia, people go to the desert to figure their shit out.
Yeah.
There's story after story of that, and at least for me, that's how I did it, and just being in that place, and then this place that I fell in love with immediately, and every day I was out there, I fell more in love, and then sharing that with other people, and seeing their eyes kind of get it too, and we would do single day and multi-day trips up to 5 or 6 days, and talking to people in this really special corner of the world where I was doing dangerous stuff, but I was making people happy. It was kind of everything I needed at the time, and really those years really. And right about then, I got introduced to this concept of anarchism, which I identify as an anarchist, and that kind of helped, get my mind around some of these things. And yeah, but it was the desert. The desert kind of heals all. And I just. The music, I enjoy it. I play with a few bands. I'm the dedicated trumpet player in a few bands. I have my own band, the New Guard Big Band, and I do a lot of freelance work, weddings and corporate events, and Broadway shows and things like that. And that's all fun, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it, but it not in the same way that I do in the desert, especially the southeastern Utah. That place is really my home.
The book you mentioned, what was the title again and the author?
Desert Solitaire by Edward Abbey. Yeah.
And
so
what's it about? Because when you said you read it and then you packed your stuff and went to the desert, so
yeah,
it has a strong message, I suppose.
Yeah. So Edward Abbey was a park ranger in Arches National Monument at the time. It's now a national park, and it's a collection of essays written kind of about his time there. And
okay.
When my friend suggested I read this, he told me that, and I just immediately started to fall asleep with his description. It sounded like the most boring thing ever. And then we were at the bookstore. He's like, "Well, read the author's introduction at least." I was like, "Okay, you're my friend. We're at the bookstore. I'll humor you." And so I did. And the last paragraph of the author's introduction, it goes like this. Let me see if I can still remember it. Finally, a word of caution. Do not jump in your automobile next June and rush out to the canyon country, hoping to see some of that which I've attempted to evoke in these pages. In the first place, you can't see anything from a car. You've got to get out of the goddamn contraption and walk, better yet crawl over the sandstone and through the thorn bush. When traces of blood begin to mark your path, you'll see something then. Maybe. Probably not. In the second place, most of what I write about in this book is already gone or going under fast. This book is not a travel guide, but an elegy, a memorial. You're holding a tombstone in your hands, a bloody rock. Don't drop it on your foot. Throw it at something big and glassy. What do you have to lose? And I read that. I was like,
oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. And so I read that and then he wrote another book called The Monkey Wrench Gang. I'm not going to give away too many spoilers, but he loved that area so much, and there's all these environmental catastrophes happening through road building and mining and damming rivers. And nobody was doing anything to stop it. The federal government wasn't doing anything to stop it. State government was actively encouraging this, all in the name of progress with a capital P. And so the book is fiction, quote fiction, but it's based on him and some of his friends that took matters in their own hands. And they started, they first started out pulling survey stakes out from the ground. Then they moved on down to burning billboards down.
Okay.
Then they graduated to ripping the wiring out of bulldozers until they realized that pouring sugar into the gas tank was more efficient, until they realized that a little bit of sand and water in the gas tank was a little bit cheaper. And then they progressed on. And that book was the start of the radical environmentalism movement. And regardless of your politics or your morality concerning all that stuff, it's a fun read. It's a hoot. But I would suggest reading Desert Solitaire first, because it sets you up to learn to understand how someone could love a place, and what would make them want to defend it in some extra legal ways.
Okay, yeah. But it's not stupid question maybe, but you don't need a desert around to read that book and to set it in place, to set it in action, or
right.
The Desert Solitude. Okay.
Yeah.
But for you, it came in handy that you had a desert around you.
Yeah, and the idea of wilderness, he speaks at great length about the necessity of wilderness. Because without, and I'm not going to do it justice, you just have to read the book, but with there's the city, and the city, even the city's not going to mean anything if there's no wilderness around it. We need a place to get away from that. And for a variety of different reasons. One is just like the soul. Even if you never step foot in wilderness, the idea of a place where you can, there's no handrails and no police and no stop signs and you have to find your own water and not everything is like taken care of for you, and it's not all safe and there being a refuge. This idea of just the idea alone of wilderness is important, and then actually having one and be able to like go out into it.
It's frightening. It's frightening, like a little bit, to go out there and to be like loose of all the securities you got here.
Yeah, it's the best feeling ever. Really, like it's you have to be way more present out there, I think, than you do here. I mean, if you break an ankle here in the city, okay, I mean it sucks.
911.
But yeah, if you break an ankle out there, it's a situation now, and that you might not, if you're alone, you might not come back from. Oh
shit.
And that's that's that idea, and not to romanticize, the danger, but I guess I am going to romanticize it. It's a good feeling that you have to. I'm much more aware when I'm out there in a real positive way.
Much more aware, and you feel much more alive also, or
yeah. I mean, I can't now. I mean, I live in the city. I'm in Central Phoenix. It's a concrete jungle, and it's cool. But every time I get to set foot on a natural surface, it always, there's something magical, and especially the slick rock up there. I went about 2 years ago. I went up to visit an area south of Moab, and the moment I set foot on slick rock, which is the sandstone that's there, it was like, it sounds silly, but it's magical. Yeah, it's and there's all these cliches about feeling connected to the earth and all that hippy dippy shit, but it's like it's true, like I like that. My foot, I remember my foot hit the slick rock, and it was like, oh, I can breathe again. Yeah, it's just, and I'll talk up Moab as in the surrounding area, the Canyon Country, being in my favorite place in the world, and it's the most beautiful place in the world. And so anybody listening, please, just don't go. It's being loved to death, and it's really sad. It's really sad to see that.
Really, what's happening there?
Yeah.
Like people going out there unprepared, or what?
Well, it just too many people. In 2012 or 2013, the state of Utah started this huge Mighty 5 campaign. It was the 5 national parks, and they sent it all over. It was international, and in 2014 is when I really started to see a difference. And you could before that you could just drive into Arches National Park. There was never a line. But Memorial Day, this was in May of 2014. There was like a 3-mile line of cars trying to get into the park. Yeah, and it was like, whoa, what is this? And now that's like an everyday occurrence there, unfortunately.
Okay, now I got what you mean. They loved it to death, so it's...
Yeah, in places I could guarantee my customers, we're not going to see anybody out here today. Now is kind of overrun. And it's really unfortunate. There's an area south of Moab. It's called the Bears Ears National Monument. It's been in the news recently because Obama made it a national monument, and then Trump took most of it away, took most of the designated status away. Ever since it was designated as a monument, it just like was a magnet. There's a bunch of pre-Columbian sites there, so ancestral Puebloan sites, what we used to call Anasazi, we now call ancestral Puebloan sites that were pretty pristine. I went there my first time in 2012, and there was still pot sherds all over the place, and lithic scatter, and even corn cobs in these 800-year-old corn cobs in these food storage sites, and
that's amazing.
And now all that's gone. Yeah, all that's gone.
Sure,
because people have visited
gone.
And they take things, and
they leave other things like their trash, for example.
Right. Yeah, and it's just it's really sad. But in the advent of the internet, you know, these places in Bears Ears, you had to know someone. Like I knew someone who knew how to get to this place, and that's how it was passed down. And now with the internet, everything
knows.
There's just there's directions to everything, you know, and it's really sad. And of course people enjoy wilderness. And so they want to go out there, but the more people that go out there, the less it becomes wilderness.
Yeah. It's a pity that this happens, and it happens not only to like places and certain places in some countries, but it also happens to whole countries, for example. Like if you look at, I don't know, countries like Bali or something there in the Asian Ocean.
Right.
It's like, or Australia, like this huge. I'm a student. I go 6 months with my backpack to Australia, work and travel. I mean, this was years ago. Like this was the thing to do. Changed Australia, and the thing in Bali changed Bali forever. Bali's now this huge co-working place where everybody goes who is an entrepreneur. It doesn't mean it's bad for the country, but it changes the country. And the more people there are, the more people will visit the sites and the nice places to visit. And with this also I had a few travel influencer on my podcast also, traveling around to nice places, nice hotels, great sites, and national spectacular things. But they told me also, when we are there, Luca, we are there for a few hours. We go there, we prepare our cameras, we wait for the perfect light of the sunset or sunrise, whatever. We make our pictures, and then we go to the next site. That's what we do. We are not there to. They are not there to enjoy, to feel the nature there, like you are, and like, I mean, when the people would go to your desert, to the Moab Desert, and really try to enjoy what you are experiencing and try to experience what you told me about, you would invite them to do that because they would respect the nature. They would pick up their trash. They wouldn't only go there to see something and make a picture out of it and show it proudly at the next friends gathering.
Yeah, it's funny. Most of my customers were like that. They was like, especially like once we got into the place, their whole mindset was like, oh, right. No, we're like guests, you know? And like this place doesn't need us. We need it. And for it to be around, we need to respect it. But then, you know, there's this I took these people, these two dudes on a multi-day 4x4 hiking trip out in the Maze district of Canyonlands. And Maze is one of the most remote places in the lower 48. And it's a hell of a place to get to. It's crazy to get to it. There's a section of road that's 4 miles long. The first time I drove it, and I say road very loosely, the first time I drove it, it took me 2.5 hours.
Oh, whoosh.
The last time I drove it, it took me 47 minutes, but I was like hauling ass. You know, it's just a wild, wild place. And I took these guys, and they were like, we want to see everything. And they had this like list of things that they read about in the guidebook. And I was like, I'm down. Sure, let's go. And we went on these huge hikes to see these things. And they would like get there, they would take the picture, and then it'd be like, okay, on to the next place.
Let's go.
And I was like, oh man, like, can we, and finally, like one of the last, I was like, can we just like hang out for half an hour here? Like, there's probably like in the history of this, like recent history of this place, there might be like 50 people maybe that have ever been where we are right now. Can we just hang and even just enjoy that fact?
It's frustrating.
You know? But
That's
no,
frustrating.
they were like, yeah. So, and I see more and more of that, especially I pay attention to some social media things about that area, and more and more it's like you get the Instagram influencers and like all that who are there for, I mean, who am I to judge what's the right reason? But
sure,
it doesn't feel
everyone can do it how he or she likes it, whatever. Yeah, but
yeah,
I remember, I know what you're talking about, because I remember one of this when I was in Brazil. Brazil is this wonderful place of nature. Like, there are so many things you can see there that just blow your mind. And I remember one particular travel when we went to the border of Brazil, to Argentina border, to the Iguazu waterfalls, who are, I think, the second biggest waterfalls after the Niagara Falls. And you can walk there, and there's a platform above the biggest one, and you stand right on top of the waterfall where the water literally falls down. Wow. It's wet. It's fucking loud. You can't hear shit. I was standing there with two. I mean, it was crowded like hell, and I was standing there, and I was so into this whole thing. You know, when your eyes get glassy and you're like, you totally zoom out of everything, and you just like, you see this and you're like, what the hell am I looking at? And then my friends came and they tipped me on the shoulder. I was like, okay, you want to go to the next one? I was like, boy, girls, can we like just stay like 5 minutes longer? It's just, I mean, have you actually looked at that thing? I mean, it's like, that's just so much more than a human could ever build and produce. It's like, whoosh. And I'm so down for going there again and doing this again. Due to Corona, it wasn't possible to go there, but I totally will return. And it's like, whoosh, fantastic. Only one thing I want to add is, like, because you spoke about also this whole Instagram thing, I think it's a problem that there doesn't exist a place in the world, or most likely most beautiful places in the world. You have already seen them on Instagram, on pictures.
Right.
They kind of lost a little bit of their magic, because it's like, New York, yeah, sure, seen that. Like the Grand Canyon, sure, seen it. Like, saw pictures, and they lose a little bit of their magic because it's like everywhere. It's like everywhere.
Yeah, there's a place in Canyonlands. It's my favorite place in the world, and I did a training trip there. I knew nothing about it. The boss was like, take a truck and like go out there. You're going to be running this trip. I was like, okay. And so me and a couple of the other guys, we went out there, and we did this whole thing, and we got to this place, and it was like, I was like, what? In my wildest dreams, I couldn't imagine a place like this. Like, it's the most beautiful, like, yeah. And It was my favorite. It was my favorite one-day trip to run by far. Everything about it's just incredible, and the sort of everything about the trip is great. But the final sort of, I call it a destination. It's just, it's otherworldly, and I wanna take my girlfriend there probably this summer, and I'm just not. I'm telling her, like, I want to take you to this place, but I don't want to name it,
spoil it,
because then like you'll like look at a picture of it, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's just, it's this massive ring of, I'm not going to describe it. It's we'll keep that.
You can't
my secret.
You can't put it in words.
Yeah, and I know, but the good thing about this is, that Memorial Day weekend of 2014, with that whole line coming out of Arches, the next Tuesday, I did a 5-day trip out into the maze, and the first part of it, we go down to I like drop customers off. They hike down to this canyon and check out some ancient art. And then I drive around that whole canyon, park at the top, and run down and pick them back up when we continue this 5-day trip. Well, after I drop them off, part of my drive to get to the other end of the canyon is I would drive by the ranger station. I always stop and hang out with the rangers there for a few minutes. And that particular day, I showed up, I parked the car, and the two rangers, Gary and Cynthia, they came out, and their eyes were just huge, and they're like, "Kevin, this weekend was crazy. There's so many people that came here." And I was like, "No, not the maze, not this place." They're like, "Yeah, it was crazy. We probably saw 10 or 12 people the whole weekend." And I was like, okay. They've been there for, decades, and a dozen people was
blew their mind.
At the end of the world for them, And I'm like, all right, so maybe, there's still some places that are hard enough to get to that will be protected for a while until we, figure out
a cheap way to go there.
Yeah.
Because if it's cheap and easy, a lot of people will do it.
And every time every time these land management agencies improve something, whether it's building a new parking lot or these roads out there are really extreme, and sometimes they'll improve them, you can immediately tell the impact that has on the environment, because immediately more people are able to access, and so there's always a push to stop them from doing that, because it's not everybody needs to be out here.
No.
It's some places, again, this idea of these places don't need us, we need them. And for them to exist, we need to be respectful.
They've been there before we appeared, and they will be there when we disappeared.
Yeah, hopefully, unless we
hopefully,
fuck it up too
Good,
much.
yeah, hopefully, yeah. Depends on the disappearing. Do we disappear because we all die, or we disappear because Elon Musk finally figured a way out to live on Mars or somewhere else?
Right. Well, I was talking about these places, whether they'll exist or not, because in Bears Ears there was a huge push to mine it. For oil.
Oh, really?
And once you do that, it's done. There's a place.
Sure.
And the name escapes me. It's in eastern Arizona. It's man, I can't remember the name of it, but it's been sacred to, I believe, the Apache tribe. And I think it just, last time I heard about it, it's this wilderness area, and it just cleared the last hurdle to be strip mined. And yeah, it's this. And by mining, people, I think, sometimes think you dig a hole in the ground and you bring stuff up. No. This is leveling entire mountains into rubble. There's a
Blowing
place
up,
in eastern Arizona called the Morenci Mine, and you can drive through it, and it's like being, I would say it's like being on a different planet, but it doesn't even feel like a planet. There's not a single living thing as far as you can see, and you're surrounded by literal mountains of rubble, and there's not a living thing there. It's devastation on an industrial scale that you can't imagine until you're in the middle of it. I mean, mountains have just been leveled, and they want to do that out there in eastern Arizona. And I think unfortunately it's going to happen. And so, you can say, well, like, these places are going to survive even after we're gone. Well, maybe not,
hopefully. I was a little bit hasty on that one.
No, I mean, I understand the thinking, and to a certain point, these places will survive without us, or in spite of us, but sometimes they won't. And, you can kind of understand, what would drive, Ed Abbey and his monkey wrench gang to do the things that they may or may not have done. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Kevin, I looked at my watch, and I realized we made a good 45-minute podcast, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And then
So we wrap this whole thing up now. There's one question I always ask my guests at the end, and I also want to ask you about that. I didn't give you this question beforehand, so when you consider everything that happened in your life, like your time at the military and your time now in the desert, your time as a guide, everything, every positive and negative thing, where you stand now, are you happy with your life?
Yeah. Like, there are certainly things that I regret, but without them, it's a hard thing to talk about. I did some pretty horrible things, but without having done that, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that's so, like, it seems like such a, I don't know, like, awful to, like, justify the things I done. I'm certainly not trying to justify that at all. And again, if I could make amends to those people, like, I would, but I think I'm on the right track. And if that's what happiness means, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
When I ask you about your favorite song, what'd you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to nail down, but I would probably there's a recording done by Miles Davis. It's called "Someday My Prince Will Come," and it's the title track off that album. And it's when I teach jazz, especially to younger kids, I always play this because it's an amazing example of individual effort and group effort. Every solo is exquisite, and then the way they play it, like Wynton Kelly, he's the piano player on, and the way he comps, so when he's playing behind the other solos, it's so brilliant. And the drummer, I think it might be Jimmy Cobb, I forget, but the way he pushes people or doesn't push people on it is brilliant. Miles plays this real Miles-esque, real simple, less is more solo. Hank Mobley. There's a story behind this. And Hank Mobley thought Miles wanted him to play like real cool, and so he did. He like played these like bebop, post bop, kind of real cool, groovy licks, and then John Coltrane comes in and does like his sheets of sound pyrotechnic stuff, and it's beautiful, and it's beautiful, but and then like Hank, as the story goes, is like pissed that like Miles told him to do this one thing and he did it, and then like Coltrane did the exact opposite, and he thought that like Coltrane showed him up, but he didn't. Like Hank Mobley's solo is so beautiful and so logical, and it just feels so good, especially juxtaposed next to John Coltrane's solo. That's just like this other thing, and it doesn't. Yeah, it's just beautiful, and the production on it is it just throw on a pair of really good headphones or some speakers, and when you listen to it, because it starts off with the bass player. I forget who's playing bass, but it's doon 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 doon, and you don't know what time it is, and then the piano and the drums come in, and it's just like, yeah.
I think
someday my Prince will come by Miles Davis and crew.
Yeah, I think I will put that up on my speaker now after our podcast.
Yeah.
When you could invite someone to this podcast to tell his or her story, who would that be?
I think my friend Marvin Scott. We met in 1998. We were both going to Mesa Community College, and he like kind of showed me the ropes, and he's a teacher. He's taught here in the States. He's a musician as well, a fantastic musician. He also plays he's also like taught in Istanbul, in Turkey.
Okay.
He's currently the director of operations at a place called Rosie's House, which is an organization here in Phoenix that provides, I believe, instruments and lessons and rehearsal space to youth that might not normally have the means to.
Mm.
They're a really great organization, and he's a really good friend, and has whenever I have an idea about something, I always like to have him. He always has a different perspective on things, and him and I can really get into topics without it getting like crazy, emotional or whatever. And I would
cool.
I think Marvin would be
Scott.
Really,
Got it.
Yeah.
Kevin, thank you so much for this huge amount of time you gifted me. So
Luca, it's been
thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
And you're likewise
like, thoughtful. Yeah, your questions have been super thoughtful, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I enjoyed it that you opened up that much, even when you were a little bit concerned that when we had our talk, but I think it went really smooth. I really enjoyed talking to you. That's why I had no problem to extend this whole thing like cool. to 1.5 hours. Like it's now 2 episodes. But Kevin, thank you so much for being here, to taking this time to tell your story, to hopefully reach a lot of people and open their eyes a little bit, and to gain awareness for this whole thing. And I would say you make a little bit you just put out where we can find the Search and Rescue Battalion and whatever you want to advertise. And after
Certainly.
that, I wrap this whole thing up.
Great. Hey, thank you so much again. It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, and again, Battalion Search and Rescue. You can find us. There's a website, but you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, and I'll send you the appropriate links.
Perfect. And if you guys out there have any problems finding it or finding Kevin on Instagram, go to my site. He's linked there on the post, and you can always write me a message and I can connect you. That's absolutely no problem. Kevin, thank you so much for being there and being here telling your story. Guys, thank you for listening again. I hope you enjoyed this 1.5 hours episode. And take care, stay healthy, and be nice to each other. And we hear us next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.